This episode is supported by MonsterJoysticks.com. Level up your Raspberry Pi with our all-in-one arcade kit using genuine Sanwa arcade parts. This Amstrad 6128 had been neglected for too long, so we took the time to get acquainted with it, and then we fixed it up to look its best, albeit with one or two battle scars. Now it's time to enjoy the system, to treat it and ourselves with some old classics. In the words of the magazine I used to love reading in the 80s, now it's time for some Amstrad action. Hello cave dwellers and welcome to the cave for an all-out celebration today of our restored Amstrad CPC 6128. We've got a huge amount to cover and we're going to do it with the help of some special guests. Take a look. Yes, Octavius Kitten will be educating us on an often asked Amstrad question. Novabug, the self-confessed Amstrad addict, will help us to enjoy the system. Legendary game coders the Oliver twins will tell us how they used their Amstrads. Speaking of brothers, we're not twins, but we did spend our early years fighting over the Amstrad. It's my sibling Ryan, and we'll be reminiscing about our early Amstrad memories. So with so much to get through, where do we start? Well, I'm going to suggest we start from the beginning, from the same place I started first time around with my Amstrad, and that's with a book very much like this. This one's called 100 Programs for the Amstrad. You see, the beauty of the CPC, like many micros, was that BASIC was built right in, and you could be programming within a second or two of turning it on. It was that kind of accessibility to instantly make a machine respond to your commands and display them on a screen which inspired many young programmers. 128K was a lot of memory for a system of this era, with rivals hosting 64, 48K or even less. This meant the 6128 was well suited to development, without expanded and sometimes delicate memory modules hanging out the back of it. The large memory was enough to host more advanced programming environments and tools while accommodating every byte of a 64K game at the same time. And the Z80 processor was common among 8-bit micros, so programs written in assembly for the Z80 could be easily ported for other machines. Two developers in the 80s who had great success were the Oliver twins, and they attribute some of their success down to the way they used the Amstrad for development. Here's a small part of a longer interview I conducted with them last year on just this subject, and you can find the full interview linked in the episode description below. Let's see what they had to say.
Well, hello and welcome, cave dwellers. I'm Philip Oliver.
And I'm Andrew Oliver.
And together we're known as the Oliver twins.
We actually used our Amstrad CPC
664 to begin with, and then a 6128.
6128, so it had lots of memory, 128K of memory, and a disk drive. And it also had a plug-in ROM assembler cartridge, which was brilliant because this computer was a really good dev environment, and it meant we could compile all the code. It thought it was compiling it for itself because the Amstrad is a Z80 chip, but actually we were compiling Z80, sending it down a ribbon cable into the back of a Spectrum, and then just getting the Spectrum to execute it. And it was a really quick turnaround, and it meant that you stayed in your editing environment. It's actually the way most games are developed, like going forward now. But in those days, to have a sort of slave computer, as it were, was actually quite novel. And we just did it simply because we couldn't conceive using that keyboard after using the decent keyboards of the BBC Micro and the Amstrad, and conceive any sort of tape drive systems on the Spectrum when we'd been used to sort of using the disk drives. So we got a electronics friend to sort of like make this ribbon cable called the SPAM, Spectrum to Amstrad Link. And that worked really well. And it also meant that if you wrote code that crashed on the Spectrum, which was common, didn't really matter. It was sent down, crashed, you still had your dev environment there, you go in, fix it, send it down, and within a minute you were playing the game again.
Yeah, and it meant you could use the whole of the Spectrum memory because you didn't have any code, any source code residing in the Spectrum memory itself. So we can use every single byte of it, and then when the game was working at full and it been taken down from the Amstrad, filling the memory up, we would simply press a special sort of secret key combination on the title screen, and that would then save it out to cassette from the Spectrum, and then that would become our master.
So apart from working hard, a secret to our success was having this sort of main dev computer with a slave computer, and it was working really, really well. And we were sort of gobsmacked when we found that other developers were not doing that sort of system, just using the computer itself, which meant that lots of saving before you run it, and then if it does crash, lots of loading, and it just took ages.
The 6128 then was clearly a capable machine in the right hands in developing games, even if the market for consuming them was on a more popular platform such as the ZX Spectrum. But as Alan Sugar, owner of Amstrad, had also acquired the ZX Spectrum, well, I'm sure he didn't mind too much where the sales came from, so long as they were on one of his platforms. And what of my programming skills on the CPC? Well, they were mostly limited to typing out listings in magazines and books like this one. Often, like in this book, with no explanation as to what the functions did or information on good programming practices, but it was enough to hook you. And the next step then would be to check the system manual to start to understand the commands you were typing in. And soon, for many of us, it led on a journey of discovery in programming which would span many more platforms. So it's time for me to crack my knuckles and get typing, and we'll come back to see how I'm getting on a little later. Large memory aside, the big advantage the 6128 had over my 464 was the disk drive, and I no longer now have to wait for slow loading tapes screeching like the Terminator falling into a vat of molten metal. An expensive add-on was available for the 464 to give it a disk drive, in the form of this disk drive interface cable and the floppy drive itself. Not only does it contain a disk drive, but also the ROMs and the chips to allow the 464 to operate with it. Chips which are already a part of the 6128, which we saw earlier in the series. And it's no small accessory to add to an already outrageously wide computer. With the disk drive next to the 464, well, it reaches a spectacular width. That really is a wide load. So the 6128 is much neater, and I can play games like Sorcery Plus, Tornado Low Level or Roland in Space from disk, although they did carry a premium price as we can see here of £13.95, at a time when tape versions of the same games may have sold for as little as £1.99 on the shelf next to it. But just look at the speed, where a tape game may take 5 minutes to load, we're up and running in a matter of seconds. And I was transported back instantly to my earliest gaming memories. Like many Amstrad owners, one of the first I played would have been in the free Amsoft bundle thrown in with the machine, in which you'll have found at least one game with Roland in the title. As Sonic is to Sega, Roland is to Amstrad, but just who is he?
Hi, cave dwellers! I expect you're wondering, who the hell is Roland? Roland is a bit of a varied and eclectic character who was designed to become synonymous with the gaming side of the CPC range. The story goes that Roland was named after the computer engineer Roland Perry, who was working with Sugar to create the CPC range. As far as the reason for the mascot being named after Perry, well, it's not entirely clear. It would seem to be just some sort of in-joke between Alan Sugar and the team, because there's very little relation between Roland Perry and the Roland of any of these games. Roland on the Ropes establishes Roland as an intrepid explorer, wandering his way around a maze-like tomb while avoiding the standard things you might find in maze-like tombs. A key problem with this game is that despite having fun gameplay, it gets very hard, to the point where it's quite clear that some of the mazes are not possible to even finish. This is a direct port of a game called Fred, a game released in the same year by Indiscomp for the ZX Spectrum and C64. Okay, so did computer engineer Roland Perry used to be an explorer of ancient tombs? No. Prior to his work with Amstrad, he was running a consumer electronics company in Essex with his friend. Roland in the Caves next. What's nice about this one is how good it looks. Anyway, this time Roland... Huh! The back of the box tells us that Roland has fallen into the caves on an extraterrestrial planet, and also, sidebar, he's taken on the special powers of aliens. Well, like Roland on the Ropes, this game didn't start out with the Roland branding. It's a port of another Indiscomp game, the ZX Spectrum's 1983 game Bugaboo the Flea. Maybe Roland can roll the weirdness back with this next game, Roland Goes Digging. Now of course you'll recognise this gameplay style from Space Panic, because this absolutely is a clone of Space Panic. Okay, well, did computer engineer Roland Perry used to be a builder? No, he didn't. I'm seeing a theme here. Roland ahoy! Roland has ditched his job as a builder and has become a pirate. As a pirate, you'll need to sail about and collect cannonballs that you'll use to blast open a harbour which is hiding the treasure you want. Once you've got it, you need to take it back to your hideout. Here comes Roland on the Run, a sad and frustrating Frogger ripoff with sound effects that will make your ears feel like they are being viciously poked with a snapped Z80 chip. The front cover shows Roland actually running away with a screen from the game itself. Apparently Roland has been held captive at Amsoft, and now he's escaped by catching a train from Brentwood Station. Now he's got to ride it all the way to a hideout in Guildford. All Roland needs to do now is jump from a carriage of a train and run across a motorway without being killed. Did Roland Perry ever have to run away from Amstrad and hide in Guildford? Okay, so that one's a maybe. Two games of Roland's which will look similar are Roland in Time and Roland in Space. Roland in Time sees our hero running around different time zones to collect crystals. Roland in Space is pretty much the same game, but you're moving from planet to planet instead. And finally, Roland goes square bashing. Straight away you're going to see similarities to Q*bert. That's because this is a clone of Q*bert, obviously, and it's one of Roland's better games. Oh, and yes, this is Roland. That little box with dinky arms and feet is Roland. Alright, so what the heck was all that about? Why did all those games look so different? Well, aside from the fact that most of them are just branded versions of already made games, there were 5 different companies making the games in total. Shoehorn in some half-baked reasons for Roland to change appearance from game to game, and you've sort of got a mascot. So, who the hell is Roland? He's a game character with absolutely zero likeness to Roland Perry, who he was named after, is capable of shapeshifting himself into a terrifying mantis creature or a cube, had a somewhat unsuccessful stint as a pirate, was held against his will by Amstrad's software departments, and is now hiding by a motorway in Guildford. I hope that clears that up. Back to the cave.
Thank you so much to Octavius Kitten there for taking us through everything you didn't know you needed to know about Roland, and she has an extended version of that video over on her channel, so do check that out. Now, while she's been teaching us about Roland, I've finished typing in my first program from this book. It's fair to say the collision detection was a little off, but we do have something that resembles a game, and typing this out as a young man would have been more than enough to encourage me to find out more. It was strangely fun typing in this old basic program, but it's not really an experience I plan to repeat again soon. Instead, I wanted to turn to something much more modern. It was time to hook up my floppy drive emulator. This is the HXC floppy drive emulator, available from a range of sellers and compatible with many systems, which is why I didn't mind splashing out on it. I can use it with the CPC as well as my other micros. Getting it to work was just a matter of setting a jumper in the right place and coupling it with this special cable. If we look at the other end of the cable, we can see it has a switch on, and by setting it correctly, it tells the Amstrad to use the external drive as the primary or drive A. This is to alleviate any problems with programs which are hard-coded to use the first drive. Pop in a memory card stuffed full of disk images, and we're all set and ready to go. The device supports long file names and folders, so it's really easy to arrange and navigate through your disk images and pick what you want to play. And then you just use it like a normal disk drive. It even emulates the sound of a disk drive through its built-in speaker, should you want that to happen. And the only problem it now presents is that I have the entire system's library of games right here at my fingertips, and I just don't know what to play next. I guess a good place to start might be with the games that I used to play or fight over. With this man, this is Ryan, my brother. Owning a computer was something of a luxury in the 80s, owning 2 was out of the question for us, so deciding what game to commit to loading from a slow cassette tape could often be a very heated discussion between us. I invited him into the cave to have a quick chat about our Amstrad memories.
So Ryan, thank you for coming to the cave to talk about the CPC, our first ever computer. I don't know if you remember it.
I remember it very well, and I remember that picture very well.
Yeah.
Now, why is it when somebody at home has a sort out and all the pictures are on offer, you could have pictures of family, picture of pets, you choose to take that picture?
That's the most important picture to me.
And I remember that was Christmas Day, wasn't it?
It was 84, 85, something like that. Now, my first question for you is, whose was it?
Well, clearly mine. I was the eldest. It was always going to be mine.
No, I'm sure it was mine. You had a pair of football gloves or something instead.
No, I think the way it went, the computer was mine, the telly was yours.
Fine, okay. Split it down the middle. Okay, I get the monitor, which is the one thing I don't have now. I had to work it out with the TV here. Now, first games. Can you remember the first game you may have played with it?
So I seem to remember a pack of games came with it.
There was the Amsoft set. I think there were about 10 or 12 games that came.
Right, and I remember they were all cellophaned up all together in one big pack. And the one that always sticks out in my memory is Roland on the Ropes.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't really remember any of the other ones. You might mention some, they might come back to me, but I remember playing that for hours and hours.
There were some terrible ones. There was Bridget. I think...
I remember the
been
cover.
The one that Mum was addicted to. It was either that or Hunchback was the other Amsoft one.
Oh yes, I do remember that. Yeah, she liked that one, didn't she? Yeah.
We had Dad's favourite, Harrier Attack.
Right. So I thought that one came later on. I didn't realise this was one of the original ones because again, I remember playing this for hours.
It's certainly Amsoft. I don't know if it came in the original pack, but yeah, that was a good one. Another one, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral.
Right, and this was one of those that it was, but. I don't know if we tried to blag that this was some sort of educational computer or something, but I remember playing that just when Mum and Dad were around. No other time. Every other time it was something else. But I remember being a bit of a sneak. Whenever they were around, I'd have that on, so I'd think I was being all educational.
Brownie points. Yeah. I think that was probably the worst. Between that and there was a fruit machine simulator as well.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, Roland on the Ropes was a good one.
Yeah.
So they're your earliest gaming memories. What about your favourite? Because we had this system for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, we did, didn't we? It kind of evolved, didn't it? I remember them initially being very, very basic. So like Roland on the Ropes, it was quite a basic game.
Yeah.
Another game, I presume we bought it at some point, was Paperboy.
Yeah.
That I remember, again, playing for hours, being really good fun. You seem to be surrounded by crazy people in a crazy neighbourhood. So you'd be cycling along, throwing newspapers at random stuff.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, Clive Sinclair would come out on his C5 and try and run you over, or a wheel would come bombing down the street at you.
There were wheels. I don't remember Clive Sinclair.
There was this funny little thing that used to come out from one of the gardens.
And then if you made it to the end, you get to go on the stunt track.
That's right, and that was nigh on impossible. I remember that as being a good game, and then it kind of evolved from there.
Yeah, I think my favourite, I don't know if you remember this, was Finders Keepers.
No,
and that was like you had to go around collecting objects, and I think there was a princess called Geraldine or something like that, or Gertrude the princess.
You obviously stashed that one away somewhere. I never saw that.
Yeah, it was that between that or Chucky Egg. I used
Chucky
to play
Egg, Egg. Of course, yeah.
And Chucky Egg, in fact, was the reason we couldn't use the Amstrad for a long time, because I spilt an entire pint of banana Nesquik over it while playing Chucky Egg.
Yes, I remember that.
For a couple of weeks.
Yeah, because I remember how that ended up. I also remember that when it came to the end of its life and we were going to upgrade to an Amiga.
Yes. Now, this is a story you only told me very recently.
Yes. Well, part of your spillage would form part of my plan to never be able to get rid of the Amstrad. So I remember we were going to get the Amiga, and for whatever reason, I didn't want to let the Amstrad go, and I knew we had to sell it in order to get the Amiga. Clearly, I didn't know how good the Amiga was at the time. I just knew I wanted the Amstrad. And I remember somebody coming around to look at it, and they were looking over it, and Mum was doing her best sales job and telling them all about how carefully it'd been looked after. And I kept chipping in with things like, the key's stuck, or he spilt his milkshake on it. And I remember getting the look from Mum and having to leave the room very quickly. But I was determined we weren't going to lose it, because I loved that computer. It was so good. But let's be honest, the Amiga was a big step up in the end.
Yeah, we sold it just about the right time, I think, where we could still get a bit of money for it.
Yeah,
and put
definitely.
That into the Amiga. But certainly some good memories. Let's play our games that we've chosen. I'm going to play this. We haven't got Paperboy here, but we've got it on the SD card.
Oh, okay.
So we'll load that up for you.
Brilliant.
And while we're doing that, we're going to go over to Chris, who's also known as Novabug on his YouTube channel. And he's a self-confessed addict to the Amstrad. He's streaming every week on the Amstrad. And he's going to tell us his top 5 picks so that perhaps we can get to know some games we missed first time around. Here's Chris.
So, I've often been asked what are my favourite Amstrad games. And I do have a definitive top 5. I actually have a definitive top 11. I could probably go down to 50 in total if I was, to ask. It's very difficult. I mean, sometimes I do switch and change depending on my mood at the time. But I've always maintained a top 5, so we're going to go with those top 5. And most of them are arcade conversions. Because I've said this before in the past, when the Amstrad did an arcade conversion right, it did it really, really well. Operation Wolf is a great example of that, and a few others. And a few others, such as Golden Axe, and Golden Axe would be my number 5 pick. It's just an excellent conversion to fit on a humble 8-bit. Golden Axe, when it came out, was a bit of a Sega loving, wasn't it? It really got a lot of fans behind it. It really, yeah, excellent port on the Mega Drive, of course, almost arcade perfect in a lot of ways, as was then the phrase. And it got a lot of character, got a lot of ethos about it. And Golden Axe spawned sequels, of course, and I think they're, you know, trying to bring it back to this day. Great theme music as well, and that all is included in the Amstrad version. It's got great theme music, great title sequences. It's got the skeleton hands where you can pick your fighter of choice. It's got all the characters, all the moves, all the stages. Yes, it's cut down a little bit, you know, it's concised for the Amstrad to fit into the memory, but my word, is it an achievement. Colourful, brash graphics, small play area, but you know, it doesn't matter. That's what you get with the Amstrad sometimes. Everything's included, and it's just a wonderful arcade conversion. I loved it. I really did love it. Saying that, so moving on to my number 4 pick. My number 4 pick is not so much an arcade conversion, but also one of the games that came very late in the Amstrad's life cycle, and that's Prehistoric 2. Very unique. There were several different versions of it. You can get a 64K version, a 128K version. There was a plus version as well, an enhanced version for the plus machines, using the 128K memory, I believe, as well. Yeah, it was an excellent game. It was more akin to a Master System game, the way it looked and the way it played. It was more akin to a console game, Prehistoric 2 was. It certainly played like that, sounded and certainly looked like it. Sort of platforming, exploration, clubbing, bashing over the head kind of style game. Really presented to the highest of quality. I think the Amstrad is being pushed to its limits to give you Prehistoric 2. It's got a great little intro as well. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic music on it. All these games I'm speaking of have got really, really good music on them as well, to be fair. Bar one, which we'll come to that in a minute. So Prehistoric 2 is definitely my number 4 favourite game on the Amstrad. Number 3 is actually quite an easy pick. This was one of my favourite games for a long, long time on the entire series, for you know, out of all the games for ages. It was my favourite ever Dizzy game. It was the first Dizzy game I completed. It was the first Dizzy game I really got it. I really got dizzy at that point. I played the first game like that, played the second game really like that, but bloody hard. Third game, they got it right, they clicked it. They got the menu system in there, they got lives in there, they got the puzzle solving perfectly, not so much backtracking going on, lots of secrets there, challenging, brilliant music, excellent Mode 1 visuals. Fantasy World Dizzy, number 3, was the best. The Olivers actually said out of the Dizzy games that they programmed, that is their favourite. Their favourite Dizzy game overall, I believe, is Fantastic Dizzy on the NES. But from the ones that they put on the 8-bits, the Amstrad version of Fantasy World Dizzy is their favourite. It got everything right. Number 2 again is an arcade conversion, and a wonderful, surprising arcade conversion. It fared well on some of the other 8-bit systems as well, and that's Gauntlet, the classic dungeon crawler, never-ending kind of thing. It's always enjoyable to play, to see what exit you can go through next, to see where you're going to go, what kind of dungeon is it going to generate this time, and it's got tons of dungeons on it. Top-down, if you've never played it, it's a top-down fantasy kind of thing. Players the warrior, the Valkyrie, the elf or the wizard. I always used to play as the wizard until I realised that the wizard couldn't do hand-to-hand combat. Yeah, it's just a thoroughly enjoyable game. It's got quite blocky visuals, but really character. It's got a lot of character to it. It's got a real nice little intro jingles to each when you go into a different stage. It's got lovely sound effects. It really has. It's got a lot of character. But it's, again, another arcade conversion that is just absolutely brilliantly done. And like I said, it did fare well on some of the 8-bit systems. I think Gauntlet was a success on the conversion stakes. But finally, probably, for my money at least, one of the best arcade conversions ever made, for the Amstrad and the Spectrum retrospectively as well, is this game very here, Chase HQ. I love the arcade cab version of this. It was, like I've said this story many times. Down the road from where I used to live, the guy used to have arcade machines outside the front of the store, and one of them was Chase HQ, and it's the first time I ever played it. My word, was I hooked. I just loved this Miami Vice. You're mixing smashing, you're mixing a little, you know, you're hitting other cars, you're mixing that with the racing aspect of it, the turbo, the speed, the feedback of the steering wheel, that kind of stuff. And when it came to the Amstrad, you know, we'd seen what devastating load of absolute rubbish Outrun had become. So a lot of hopes weren't up, but when it came out, wow. Chase HQ blew everyone's socks away with the conversion it got to the Amstrad. I mean, visually it's amazing. The speed is surprisingly fast. The Amstrad really couldn't do a lot of speed when it came to racing games, but some racing games it does really well. Buggy Boy is one, another example as well. But Chase HQ, the speed is there, the turbos are there, the criminals are all there, the stages. Nearly everything bar the music. The only thing that is missing is the music, which unfortunately the Spectrum version does have. It does have the theme music to it. The 128K version of Chase HQ on the Amstrad does have the samples from the arcade, which is really goosebump. It's really nice to hear the sort of the speech samples from the arcade. The little credit sound is in there as well for a little bit of extra character. The lights flash at the top when you're chasing the criminals. It's just a great game. Great sound effects too. Really good sound effects, and presentation is just impeccable for what they could have achieved on the Amstrad with a game like Chase HQ. It's surprising, and I fear it will always be my #1 pick when it comes to games as a whole. When you put all the ingredients together, the visuals, the graphics, the music, and everything else, it is a shame it's missing the music, sure, but it doesn't detract from the fact that the sound effects are fantastic, especially the 128K version. Chase HQ is definitely my favourite Amstrad game. I could go on, but I'll leave it there. So thank you very much for listening to the Novabug here, and I hope to see you on my channel. Cheers.
Well, thank you to Chris. Go and check out his channel, Novabug, for lots more Amstrad goodness like that. Ryan, how did you get on with Paperboy?
Yeah, good. I'd forgotten actually how difficult it was to play.
Yes, isn't it?
It is really difficult, but yeah, good fun. Really good fun.
Good game. And if you ever played it on the arcade, if you had
With the
handlebars to play,
yeah.
and I found that really difficult. So I actually find it easier on the Amstrad than I do on the arcade itself. Well, it's been great having you today. I hope you enjoyed looking back at the Amstrad. It's been a long time, hasn't it?
It has. I honestly didn't think I'd ever see one again, so thank you. It's brought back a lot of memories. It's good.
Excellent.
And so our look back at the Amstrad CPC 6128 comes to a close. I've really enjoyed coming to understand the hardware in the machine in a way that my younger self never did, rescuing this example and giving it a second chance, and revisiting old memories with friends and family. And for a while, it even impressed a new generation of gamers in Thomas and Max here, enjoying the Amstrad in exactly the same way that Ryan and I did when we were their age. As always, thank you for watching and take care. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting the channel using the links in the description, or simply subscribe and come back for more soon.